welcome to Lee County Pod. This is Jack Campbell, your producer. Our host, Pete Milidnik. Will you please open us up and introduce our guest?
Thank you, Jack. Today we are with Levi Hill, journalist and author, and we're going to talk pretty much about Levi's own writing. And so we're eager to find out about that. This is your second podcast with us, Levi. We're happy to have you again.
Thank you. Yeah, we talked last time about kind of hunting and stuff, and since then I've had a chance to talk with the Eunice Rotary Club about some of that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, and for today, I guess to start off with a basic, what for me seems like a basic fundamental question. What pleasure do you get from the act of writing? Is it a pleasure for you, and if so, how or why?
It is. It's a very deep pleasure. So I had the fortunate luck to grow up with a father who was a storyteller, and he was quite a storyteller. Knew how to tell a story. I don't know where he learned it, but he knew how to tell a story. And I just fell in love with good stories. And it shames me now that since he's passed, I have a hard time remembering the stories. And he might have told them to me 100 times, but now they seem like they're fading. And it kind of hurts. But I do love to write because I love to tell a good story. And that's to me, I just love sharing a good story. And when I write one, something I can go back and read and not get caught up in the fact that I'm the one that wrote it, but just in the story itself, I feel like that's where I've accomplished telling a good story.
Yeah, and a lot of those stories coming from the oral tradition.
Yes.
Let's say like hunting, sitting around the campfire.
Exactly.
Like that too. Yeah, interesting. Even if you have written it yourself, you get caught up in really the events of the story. Interesting. Another question, is writing cathartic for you? For example, if you find yourself writing about something or things that might be unpleasant, do you feel any satisfaction from writing about that topic?
Being in journalism, you end up writing a lot of stories that aren't feel-good stories, that are very emotionally heavy. You've got murder cases, child abuse cases, things that are really sad. And as a journalist, I guess you learn to kind of take your feelings and set them aside while you're doing the job and just focus on writing the story. But there is still, when you're done, there's still the sense of pride that, hey, I told this story right. Mm-hmm. And it's going to make a difference somehow. Whether it ever makes a difference or not, I don't know. But you tell yourself that and believe that that's the case, because I guess deep down you need to get through it and to keep going. That you're not just dragging somebody's dirty laundry through the city streets, that what you're doing matters. And I think it's kind of self-preservation to hold on to that belief that what you're doing matters. And then there's that pride of, I did this right.
And going back, I guess, to the process of writing, and for it being pleasurable, basically, do you write with a pen and paper or?
I prefer to type, computer or typewriter, although I haven't used a typewriter in years, but used to. My brain, when I'm trying to type a story, is usually running ahead at my fingers. I'm lucky enough that I've been able to build up, and I'm about 73 words a minute on the keyboard, which ain't too bad, but no. I find my brain still runs faster than my fingers do, and I recently had somebody tell me that they thought I had a little bit high-functioning autism because of the way my brain works, and you think it might be an insult, but in a way I've always found that to kind of be a strength for me, that I can absorb, as far as journalism goes, I can absorb quite a large amount of data and then process it, and then all of a sudden it just comes flowing back out onto the paper in the form of a story. And I really feel like that's probably an asset to what I do, and I don't know that everybody has that. I watch other reporters, I've been in this job 20 years, I watch some of them struggle when they're putting together something, a big complex story. But for me, it's always, once I figured out how to do it, it just became easy, because I could take all the data, set it aside in my head and let it kind of percolate, and then all of a sudden when I find the voice I'm looking for, it just comes right back out. And sometimes I have to go back and reread it because I don't even realize what I've put down on paper. Like, it's not consciously available to me. Like, did I write this? Did I put this in the story? And I have to go back and make sure, yeah, I sure did. And I don't know, it works for me. Again, I don't know if everybody has that, but I think if you're a writer, you probably need some of that maybe sometimes.
And probably the keypad or the keyboard is more conducive for getting the volume of that out than would be writing.
Oh yeah, I don't write fast. I'm a lefty, so lefties, we have to push the pen along instead of pull it. And I was never a fast hand writer, and my cursive was atrocious. So I'm to the point now where I print everything if I write by hand. And I don't think I could write by hand and keep up with my brain enough to be as successful or as accomplishing doing what I'm doing otherwise.
Sure, yeah. There was actually, I can't quite pinpoint the year, but one year where I used to write with pen and paper a lot, simply because of my environment when I was teaching, and I was around a lot of paper, and now I have to buy the paper myself, but and I buy it and I put it in the printer for the computer, but there was a period where I just pretty much went exclusively to typing on the keypad, and I do most of my writing actually right on this phone that I'm looking at.
I've been doing a lot on my phone lately. I've been using a little AI program and kind of working with it to develop a story for a fantasy novel, and kind of using the AI to feed me stuff, to kind of give me new ideas and kind of keep me on my toes. But I'd much rather be doing it on a keyboard than on my phone, because my thumbs are getting sore.
Well, going from the process of writing to the content, you write both fiction and nonfiction.
I do.
Yeah. If so, how do those two differ for you? Say a true story from one that's made up. Although I say that, and I think even a story that somebody makes up has some possibly basis in reality.
I don't think you could tell a story that didn't have any basis in reality and have it hit. You have to be able to tell a human story, and I'll relate it to, say, something like Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. Star Wars is pure fantasy, but there's that human element in there. The struggle between good and evil, right and wrong, loss and gain. And if you don't have that element of it that can be relatable, I don't think it would have, it wouldn't be what it is today. Right. It wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar legacy and a franchise. And I think, as far as my writing goes, fiction versus nonfiction, I think I still have the same goal in mind. Whichever way I'm going into it, I want to tell a story. And just recently, I had somebody come and talk to me about a story I had written in the paper, and it was about a little road trip that Mom and I took around from here over to El Paso and back around, and the different historical sites that we passed and stuff. And a guy called me up, telling me how much he enjoyed it, and he said, what I really like about your story is it feels like an adventure. He said, I feel like I'm right there with you as you're doing it, and that's how I write, because I want you to see what I see. I want you to enjoy it like I enjoy it. And I'm not just trying to give you a history lesson. I want to take you on the adventure, because those are the kind of stories that speak to me.
Yeah, and Jack and I were talking earlier today about the idea of images as it pertains to poems, but it's so basically it's descriptive writing. You know, writing that will you'll have a lot of words like chair and window and that give a picture of things and how that's so important because it's what draws the reader in.
Right.
You know, the reader gets a picture of what I was right there with you. Yeah, so you should be, and all of that.
I always like to think about one of my favorite authors is for fiction is H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
You know, great horror fantasy writer, but his works are always extremely descriptive. He really paints you a picture of where you're at. You know, in Old Town Gotham, which is New York, you know, and the darkness and the gray skies and the streets and the aura of mystery in the air. And he'll paint you this huge picture before he ever really gets into what's the action part of it. So then by the time you get into the action part of it, you always feel like you know where you're at. And it really adds to that sense of ominousness, you know? And so I always think back to that because I think, man, if you don't let them know where they're at, then they'll make it up for themselves or they'll just give up and walk away. And so I feel like you really have to paint a picture for people in words and really show them. I mean, again, Star Wars, right? We can see all the creatures on the screen and the starships and stuff. Well, that's because it's a movie. And we got to do the same thing when we write. We got to show them what we want them to see. And it's fun. It's fun to pick that picture in words.
Sure, yeah. Are there some stories or nonfiction pieces that you revise and some that you get it right the first time, let's say?
Everything gets some kind of revision, whether it's grammatical or sentence structure, or I realize I need to go back and fix a few things that didn't quite come across like I wanted them to. I recently, last year I think it was, I'm part of a writers group thing that's on the internet, and they put out weekly challenges for writers, and I think there's like a $50 prize for most of them. But they did one last year at Halloween, and it was I think it was a $500 prize, and it was to write a scary story, and with the prompt that they gave you. And I sat down with that prompt, and again, the only thing that really came to mind was H.P. Lovecraft, and so I started really thinking about his writing, and I don't know why. Again, maybe it's the autism part of it, but if I sit down with an author I like and read some of his stuff, I can kind of duplicate his voice. Mm-hmm. If it's a voice of a writer that I resonate with, right? So, you know, for my hunting stories, it's Peter Hathaway Capstick or Robert Rourke. If I read a few of the things, I suddenly start to get into the mindset of how they write and start kind of emulating it. Same thing with H.P. Lovecraft. I just started thinking about him. I was like, how would he write it? And I really put together this really great, to me, I loved it. I let my mom read it. She liked it. Really great story, and but it was like 8,000 words. Well, the limit was 5. So I had to go back and cut this story that I'd gotten all put together the first time back down to 5,000 words.
Quite a reduction.
It was quite a reduction. So it required a lot of thought, how I would change, how I would describe things, and maybe shorten up without losing what I had already, you know, how to shorten it without really losing the feel and everything of it. It didn't end up winning anything, but it was a good experience. Mm-hmm. And then I have edited books for a couple of people, gone through and read them and stuff. Most recently, I did a book for a guy who was an architect, and and structural engineer, and he'd written a book about his career. He's a structural engineer, so it's all very cut and dry. We went here, we did this, but within what he's telling you, you're looking at some of this stuff and you're like, wow, that's a story, you know. It's, as a journalist, I see that and I go, ooh, that's a good story, you know. He's telling you like it happened and not really making a big deal of it, but it was a big deal. There were some things, dangerous things that he did in his career and exciting things, but he's just telling them flat. And so I went through and did all the copy editing, and I told him, I said, look, if you want help, I said, I think your book, I think there's some really amazing stuff in this book. If you want help kind of fleshing it out in a way that it'll reach the reader and really draw them in, and that it's not just a book for other architects and engineers, I said, I'd be happy to help you with that. Never came back, but it's his book, so he needs to tell it like he wants to tell it. But I think it had the potential to be the kind of book that would grab not just his clientele, but lots of people, because he really did have some wonderful experiences. Really interesting thing.
Jack and I have come across we can talk with you about it later, a manuscript that somebody had written, unpublished, somebody from Hobbs' experiences of being a World War II prisoner of war.
Oh wow! Wow.
Yeah. That all depends on what that person wants to do with his.
It's his book.
Sure.
But I looked at it and I thought, from the perspective of a storyteller, that there were stories here that could really capture the imagination. You just had to kind of give them that massage, that little wordplay and stuff, and find a way to insert some tension and drama into them that he wasn't doing, because to him it was just, he's very cut and dry, very, like a professor, like a history professor. They're just giving you history. They're not adding any romance to it. So there's no romance in his writing, but that's his writing, But he really has some really fascinating stories in there.
And depending on what he wants to do with it, maybe just privately publish it and distribute it to other architects, but it could be more.
Right, it could be, but it could also be even more engaging, even for other architects. Because I don't think he sits down and reads a book and maybe a science book, right? Even for him, you sit down and reading a book about architecture that's cut and dry, I'm sure it's even boring for him if he doesn't. So, I think if you wrap people up in the story and draw them in, I think you'd even learn it better, really.
Yeah.
Personally.
Sure. Yeah,
because you're going to remember it better.
Exactly.
Because it's, you end up making it a part of yourself, and you become part of that whole experience. So, to me,
you're emphasizing I think the best teacher for a writer is reading.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Because people will tell you things that could be contradictory. Oh, do this, do that. Ultimately, you must decide yourself. But how do we learn? How do we learn what a sentence is, what a paragraph is? You read them, and you really emphasize that importance here in the revision process. If only there were, I don't know, we have our habits and everything. I know, like I write book reviews, and I have a system, I have a method, but for poetry I don't, just because of the nature
it's free.
Of poetry. If I had a way of doing it, it wouldn't be poetry.
Exactly. Exactly.
But you are emphasizing too, though, I think, Levi, the importance of discovery. Like you don't know what you're going to write until you have it down, and that to me is a real satisfactory aspect of writing.
It is, because
I didn't know I was going to write that, but I did.
Right. Well, it's self-discovery, and it's an adventure. You're taking yourself on an adventure, and you're learning more about who you are in the process.
There's somebody who was mostly a fiction writer, also in poetry, Raymond Carver, and he had a saying, "Get black on white." Such a good, succinct way of putting it.
Right.
I could tell you what I'm going to do, but go ahead and do it.
That's it.
I assume, of course, that you write for yourself. Do you write for other people or with an audience of readers in mind?
I think everything I write has got an audience in mind. I do it because I enjoy it for me, but I think I'm always thinking about who do I want to read this and what do I want them, and maybe that's from being in journalism for 20 years, what do I want them to get out of it? Because in journalism, you're trying to convey knowledge or inspire or elicit a reaction from the reader, because all you're doing is you're giving them facts. But you still want, at the end of the day, and it's a fine line to walk, you still want the reader to make a decision, whatever decision they make, and then hopefully take action. You know, I've written stories till I'm blue in the face about low voter turnout. People still don't show up to vote. You know, I haven't written that story that reaches enough people the right way yet, and maybe there isn't a way to do it, I don't know, but to get to that reaction where suddenly they realize, I need to get off my butt and go vote, you know? And things like that, anything like that, getting the readers to realize that what city government's doing impacts their lives, and to come to a meeting and stand up and say, no, we don't want this, or yes, we do. So I'm always thinking about who I want to read it and how I want them to react to it. But that doesn't take away any of the pleasure I get of writing it, especially if it's something that I want to be doing. Outdoors columns, or I just did a story on Cornudas, Texas, which is a little bitty town between here and El Paso, and apparently they're haunted. And I went down there for their folks' first ever ghost hunt and hung out, and we went and we tried to connect with a ghost, but it's got a fascinating history, and there's a lot of crazy history in that area. And, you know, Jeff Bezos has a rocket launch site just near there. He's got the clock of the clock of the Forever Now, or something like that it's called. It's a huge man-made clock buried 600 feet deep in a mountain, and it only ticks once every year on the second hand, and then once every 100 years on the minute hand. It's supposed to run for 10,000 years.
Wow.
With no human interaction, no human adjustments or repairs. So there's just tons of real neat history out there that goes back to the conquistadors, to the early Spanish, Native Americans, and of course you get in the ghost thing, which I'm kind of into too, really excites me. So I wrote a big story about it, and I just loved every minute of writing it, and had a ball doing it. And I just wanted to share. I wanted to share that story and my excitement with the readers.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah, you know, we can't write with the reader looking over our shoulder.
Oh, no.
Or something like that. You know, we could be paralyzed by self-consciousness.
Sure.
You know, or writer's block. You know, I'm paused there. What am I going to do? You know, I'll think about it. Well, thinking about it, go back to that saying, get black on white. But two things I don't want to do myself when I write this. I don't want to bore the reader, you know, because if I do, the reader won't keep reading. But I don't want to confuse the reader too. I have a problem sometimes with clarity. You know, I've got to make, yeah, it's clear to me, but is it clear to Jack? Is it clear to Levi?
Right.
Is it clear to other people? You know, I have to ask myself that question.
and I think from a journalist perspective, that's where being in journalism helps, because every story I write, somebody reads it first before it goes to press and says, I don't understand what you just wrote here. So you're getting that constant feedback from an editor that's really helps you realize, oh, that's where I keep failing. If you're willing to accept that you aren't perfect, if you don't have an ego about it, and are you willing to accept constructive criticism, then you can go, oh, that's where I fail as a writer. Let me work on that. I keep being vague, or I keep forgetting that I know things that the reader doesn't know, and I got to be sure to put those in there. It's tough as a writer to take constructive criticism and editing because it's such a personal experience, and to have somebody go, oh, this isn't good, you know, that hurts, right? Because hey, that's mine. You know, don't tear my stuff apart. But you start out in journalism, and man, young journalists, it's a hard thing, especially if you get an editor who just doesn't give a good gosh darn about your feelings, right?
Well, in the publishing world, I mean, if you can't handle rejection,
Don't try to publish.
Yeah,
That's
because
it.
there's, I mean, it's a lot of rejection in the publishing world.
There it is.
But when you get an acceptance, it's gratifying.
Oh,
too.
sure.
Yeah.
I used to have a friend that was trying to publish books.
You know that I feel like that this is the question or the major question for me as somebody talking with you here, hosting you, co-hosting you. Does your writing as a journalist, writing news articles, feed into your own writing, your own personal writing? And I think of, you know, one famous person, Ernest Hemingway.
Absolutely.
I guess journalism didn't hurt him.
No, it didn't, and yeah, he was an incredible journalist, and so was Robert Roark. Robert Roark was often known as the poor man's Hemingway. I kind of lived in Hemingway's shadow, but he was an incredible writer in his own right.
Yeah.
And both of them were big game hunters. Both of them were men of action, had served in the military, seen things that most of us don't ever want to even think about. So there was a lot between the two of them that was very similar. And
for you, I mean, does it feed into your own personal writing?
it does. I think it fed into theirs, and I think it feeds into mine. It's nice when I can write a story that I want to write, like the Cornuda story or, you know, whatever. But it's always giving me ideas on where to go with things. I just started working on a book, nonfiction. It's about the Lost Ben Sublet gold mine, which is down kind of in the Orla area of Texas, not too far from here. I feel like the story's been told about Sublet and his mine a few times in some books, but I don't think that anybody's ever put it all together into one. And that's kind of my goal, is to kind of gather as much of it as I can and put it all together in one. I recently spoke on the phone and did a quick interview with a man who claims to have found it, but it's on private land. Claims that he found it because he bought out an old printing company and there was documents there that had information that led him to it. I'm not going to ask him to show me where it is necessarily, because anybody that's got a gold mine ain't going to show you, but I'd love to know if he's got history about Sublet that other people have never heard before. I'd love to be able to collect it, put it in a book. But yes, I think journalism plays into everything else that I write. I mean, it's just part of who I am at this point.
You know, because people being people, one could say, oh, I'm so busy, you know, writing for the newspaper, that when I'm not writing for the newspaper, I just want to go and play
Solitaire.
golf or something like that. Or, but everybody's different, and
well, and it can be that way.
Yeah.
You know, you get home at the end of the day and you're like, I don't have the energy to write anything else for myself. And maybe you don't. You poured everything you had into something you did for work.
And you know, like I think the way you said before, if it's something that you really want to write about,
I'm still fulfilled at the end of the day, even if I can't go home and write another chapter in my book. I've still done something. My name's still on that, and I still had a good time writing it. And at the end of the day, I get to do it all over again tomorrow.
Right. I just to slightly redirect real quick. You mentioned that in terms of editing and your people having difficulty or challenges, you mentioned that your friend was trying to write something. Could you discuss that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I had a friend, a fellow journalist some years ago that was writing some, I think they were science fiction books. I never read any of them. But he had been trying to farm them out and find a publisher, and he was collecting his rejection letters, and he had up to 240 something of them at that time. I don't know if he ever got his book published. I lost track of him, and I've never seen his book anywhere, but maybe he did. but it was to him, those rejection letters were actually a mark of pride, honor maybe, that he hadn't given up on himself yet. I don't know. He kept them all on a board, and,
Wow.
and he just sat there and he just kept counting them, because I think he just figured that one day one of them wouldn't be in a rejection letter. So he was just wanting to see how long it would be, but you know.
I wonder if it got accepted.
I wonder. I don't know. I've never come across his name, but I don't know if he used a pen name when he wrote his book or not. You never know.
We go back to the thing of liking doing it. If you don't like doing it, do something else. Life's too short. But if you do, and I think the thing is too, part of the challenge is to keep liking doing it, because life has changed.
That's it.
And
You stop
and that's where reading things that you like. When I read something that I like, it motivates me to want to. Oh, I want to do it too.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, I can't even imagine how many people have written a book that never got published because nobody gave it a chance, and how many of them are To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
You know, a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
But it just set in a. Maybe they were too afraid to farm it out. Maybe they got rejection letters and gave up. Maybe, you know, who knows? But how many great stories might be sitting out there that we've never had the pleasure of getting to experience, because it's such a competitive market.
You know, because it's like twofold. There's that writing process that you and Jack and I control. Then there's, okay, I want somebody else to read it besides my family. How am I going to do that? Well, I got to try to get it published, and it's a whole other side to it. Really.
It is.
You know, and
there are people who will write it and set it aside, and they're just happy they wrote it, and they never try to get it published because that's not part of what they want. But again, maybe what they just wrote was just wonderful, and we're just missing out.
yeah, and it's hard sometimes, you know, when you submit to 10 places and get rejected by 9 of them, and it happens over and over and over again. But you know, if you don't want that 1%, then
That's it.
do something else. You know, I mean, because the rejections will be there.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Several years ago, I sent my outdoors columns to every outdoor magazine publication in the country. I don't think I missed one of them, trying to see if anybody would pick me up, and I don't think I got but maybe 2 or 3 rejection letters, and the rest were dead silence.
I try to look at it though, you know, like this, because I've heard editors say, yeah, I rejected somebody and they got belligerent with me and all. They didn't ask me to send it. You know, it's
Right.
their magazine, it's their journal, they have every right to say no.
That's it.
You know?
They do.
And somebody says, I just got one of these. We like the voice in your poems, but you liked it, but you didn't take them. You know,
Right.
It's either yes or it's a no.
That's
You can sugarcoat it or just flat out say no. It's yes or no. But that they said they like my voice says to me, okay, I'll give them another try. You know, and this is a journal that a couple of years ago I published some stuff in too.
You're just looking for that right person that sees what you're capable of.
Oh yeah, because it's all different. I mean, editors are as individual as any other kind of people.
As writers.
Yeah, sure.
Just to check, again, another question real quick. You've had 20 years in the business, so to speak. Is there any particular book that you read when you were a kid that you hold up as a standard of what good writing is versus what you see and read today?
Man, I grew up went to college and studied English. I've read a lot of the greats. I mean, just to pick one.
Well, not necessarily one, but just the idea of what.
So maybe my idea of good writing might be different than somebody else's. I can tell you that there's some books that I go back and reread over and over again because to me they're great. They speak to me in a certain way. Horn of the Hunter by Robert Rourke, and Outdoor Stories. Anything by Peter Hathaway Capstick is wonderful. I go back and read those periodically over and over again. David Eddings, fantasy novelist, love his works, read those over and over again. I've read To Kill a Mockingbird 3 or 4 times probably. Controversially, I like Lolita by Nabokov. You know, it's the guy took a very taboo subject and found a way to make it a good book. You know, it's poignant, it's sad.
Which poem is it? Which book is that?
Lolita.
Oh yeah,
By Nabokov.
Sure.
It's people have caught me reading it at the store and they give me a funny look, but he really is a great writer.
I had a teacher who was a fiction writer he knew Nabokov personally, but he said Lolita was like one of Nabokov's crowning, one of the big novels of one of the big Russian writers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's books that I think to me stand out. I will tell you that probably the book that's had more influence on me than any other is Coronado's Children by James Frank Dobie. And I was in high school and I was tasked with writing a research paper about the conquistadors, and in my research that book came up. And it didn't really help me with the research paper because it's all folklores and legends, but Dobie was a storyteller. I think he's an incredible storyteller. His books, although a lot of people don't know him, I mean, he's got an amazing voice, descriptive, and he talks about the world in a way that I think a lot of people don't even realize that they're missing out on. And so that book, it inspired me not only a love of treasure hunting, but of folklore and history. And I don't think I was really interested in history until I come across his book. And then the way he talks about life and people, describes the Southwest in a way it's kind of like you feel like you're stepping into sort of like the John Wayne type movies, right? It's an idealized version of the world that he kind of paints this broad stroke with about how he views the Southwest with such a deep reverence and love, and the people. He loves the people, And so that book, probably, I can't even tell you how many times I've gone back and reread it. But I just, I think if it hadn't have been for coming across someone like that, I don't know if I'd ever really jumped into writing quite like I have.
Well, I think you're in a unique position being a journalist and author of, original works, in part because besides reading, I think the biggest way to learn how to write is to write.
Oh yeah.
Get black on
Do
white.
it.
Practice. That adage, practice makes perfect. And yeah, it's good to be open to the opinions of others. Ultimately, you've got to live with yourself. Ultimately you want to sound like yourself.
That's it.
Well,
and I tell all the young journalists, because most of them these days, I don't read. I said, well, if you want to write, you need to read.
Oh yeah.
And I said, and you need to read everything. Don't just read Cosmo, don't just read, this author or that author, because first of all, those voices that you're going to be reading will eventually come into play in your writing as a journalist, because you need to have a repertoire of voices, authoritative, cajoling. You need to learn how to reach the reader on different levels for different stories. And so, I encourage them to read. And I said, and then when you find somebody whose writing really speaks to you, really read a lot of it and absorb it, because that means their voice is similar to your natural voice. Learn how they use their voice, and adapt it to you, because it's kind of like, if you were making something, right? And I'm like, oh, I want to learn to make that too. I watch the tricks that you've learned and pick up on them and I go, oh, well, so Peter's gonna hammer out this piece of steel and he's doing this, and he's doing that. The same thing with writing. You look and you analyze the writers that speak to you and say, how do they take their voice that's so much similar to mine and really push it.
Yeah, and in keeping in mind too, that voice is, there's nobody, it's like a person's signature.
It is.
You know, there's only one you, there's only one Jack, and you want to sound like yourself, but the way you do it is you read, you know,
You gotta
get a sense of that writer's voice.
Once you've got a sense of other writers, you start to realize what yours is.
Yeah.
Because you'll read things that go, oh, you know, I don't really like the way this guy writes most of the time, but in this book or in this poem or whatever, it really spoke to me. So that's kind of who I am. So I need to look at that and say, now how do I make myself say that in my own way?
Yeah, yeah, and really it's that reading and just getting down to it, and I guess, you know, I'm thinking of not news articles right now, Levi, but your own writing again. Do you ever surprise yourself by writing something like spontaneously that you didn't plan on writing?
Yeah, I think that does happen. I don't do I haven't done a lot of the fiction writing as much as I have the nonfiction and the journalism stuff. But sometimes, even with the journalism stuff, I will sit down and I know I have to write this story, but I don't really want to write this story, and I don't have any invested emotional interest in this story, but it's part of the job today, and I have to get it done. And all of a sudden, it all comes together, and I've just put together something, and I'm like, wow, you know, I didn't even want to do this, and look how well that reads, and so it happens.
Yeah.
In both, it's just I think when you're doing it for yourself and you're kind of exploring whether it's fiction or nonfiction, either one, it's that surprise again, self-discovery. I didn't realize that I had this in me. And sometimes I've sat and even written outdoors columns, and all of a sudden what comes out is just not, it wasn't where I was headed, it wasn't what I was expecting to write, what I had planned to write, and sometimes I'm so amazed at the depth of my own words. I mean, maybe that's egotistical, but sometimes I say things that I'm like, I didn't know I had that in me.
That's one thing for myself, having taught writing, required writing in school at the junior college for 30 years. You come across some really good essays by noted writers, and sometimes your students too.
Oh yeah.
I learned to appreciate that nonfiction in addition to fiction, and coming in contact with it that way. Jack, do you look like you're gonna?
No, I don't have anything
Okay.
right now.
Well,
I think we've pushed our time. I really appreciate you guys having me today.
we appreciate your coming back with us, Levi, and
Anytime.
maybe there will be another podcast. But we wish you well in your writing endeavors and publishing and the journalism as well. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate you both.
Well then, just a second here. Once again, Mr. Hill, and I will
How
use
long was
Mr.
that?
Hill. Thank you for joining us for the County Pod. Until next time, for Pete Militnik, this is Jack Campbell signing off.